Hi everyone, my warm greetings to all of you. So in this particular video, we are going to discuss all the key developments that have happened in recently held COP28 Conference of Parties 28, which has been held in Dubai, UAE. In this particular video, we shall be discussing all the contemporary development, but along with that, I would like to discuss this entire topic from the point of view of static developments also that have been there. So let's start with this particular video, and also I would like to tell you that notes of this particular session has been provided at our Telegram channel. Link for Telegram is given in description box in YouTube. Just you can visit, and all the detailed notes strictly from the point of view of UPSC examination have been provided there. And also this video is going to be quite comprehensive, exhaustive, but to the point video, and I will not suggest you to go and read anything beyond what we are going to discuss here with respect to COP28, climate diplomacy and related issues. So let's start with this video. So basically guys, actually what happened, environmentalism as a social movement started in late 1960s. Little bit of a background I would like to give you. So in 1960s, these two books were published, that is The Population Bomb and The Silent Spring. And these two books highlighted that how negative interference has been done by humans in the environment and how it is going to threaten the existence of future generations. And it is needed that we need to conserve environment immediately. And a kind of an ethical stream within the environment, that is environmental ethics, also emerged in 1970s. And environmentalism as a social movement propagates conserving the environment and ensuring that flora fauna should be conserved. And on the basis of this environmentalism, Sweden took an initiative, and Sweden insisted the UN ECOSOC, that is United Nations Economic and Social Council, that within the purview of United Nations, one international convention or some international treaty on climate change should be enacted. And therefore what happened, United Nations General Assembly in 1972 called a conference in Sweden, Stockholm. And this Stockholm conference became first international conference which took up the matter of environment. And in this particular convention, in this particular conference, Stockholm Declaration was unveiled. Now this Stockholm Declaration, it consisted 26 principles of environmental conservation, and it ranged on a lot of areas that how environment could be safeguarded, how humans abuse of environment could be restricted. And this actually became the founding arrangement for environment negotiations, for environment cooperations in the times to come. First of all, we are going to discuss that what are the key takeaways from the Stockholm 1972 that came. And here guys, will not go too much in detail because that is not relevant for our UPSC examination. So we will just be ensuring that only the relevant information we are going to take. Now, what happened? First of all, as an outcome of Stockholm, UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, was born after the Stockholm Conference. Now, guys, understand this particular thing. It was created as a dedicated agency which will take up environment and related matters. Also, guys, during this particular time, one interesting thing you should know, that developing countries were not that much inclined for environmental conservation, but still they supported UNEP because this became first UN organization whose capital was in the global south. Its capital was in Nairobi, Kenya. So this was the reason that developing countries supported it. And then further what happened in in Stockholm Conference, Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, also participated. And Indira Gandhi here made a famous speech where she linked ecology with the environment, ecology with poverty. She linked ecology with poverty, and she said this particular thing, that ecological conservation, environmental conservation happens to be very important if poverty alleviation has to be successful. Many people derive their livelihood from environmental resources, and if environment will not be conserved, those people's livelihood cannot be conserved, and therefore poverty as a problem cannot be solved without solving the problem of ecology. And also what happened, India took notable steps after Stockholm Conference of 1972 and made environmental conservation as a mainstream agenda. So let's see that what are the changes that came in India post Stockholm Conference of 1972. So first important change that was brought was enactment of 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. And within the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, we can see that Article 48A was added in DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. And within the Fundamental Duties chapter that got added, within the fundamental duties, one specific fundamental duty, that is Article 51A subclause G was added, and 48A DPSP, 51A subclause G fundamental duty both emphasize on environmental conservation. Then what happened? After Stockholm, many legislations with respect to environmental conservations also got passed in India. For example, Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which aimed to conserve the wildlife in their natural habitat. Water Act 1974, which aimed to solve the problem of water pollution, water contamination, etc. Forest Conservation Act 1980, Air Act 1981, and Environmental Protection Act 1986. All these particular legislations were enacted after India participated in the Stockholm Conference. Then guys, one more very important change that came in India after attending the Stockholm Conference was judiciary's attitude towards environmental conservation. Now guys, understand this particular thing. Judiciary also started to interpret that within the domain of Article 21, right to life, environment is a key component. Without conserving environment, without conserving air, water, natural resources, humans cannot live a dignified life. And environmental activism, environment related petitions, they were filed in Supreme Court and court started entertaining them. And here we see the activism of MC Mehta during 1980s. Activism of MC Mehta during 1980s. Now guys, when we talk about MC Mehta, you might have heard a lot of cases where MC Mehta is involved, and MC Mehta has filed many petitions in Supreme Court with respect to the water pollution, with respect to environment related safeguards. And there are many cases on MC Mehta, that is MC Mehta case 1986, 87, multiple cases are there. And in these cases, landmark judgments have been given by Supreme Court for environmental conservation. Okay. Then moving on, so all these particular things continued. However, there was a sense of global apathy. Though certain safeguards were taken by countries such as India, but generally there was a sense of apathy and some binding commitments were needed that were not coming in place. So therefore, in order to solve this problem of global apathy, what happened? World countries decided that they should meet in 1992, and Earth Summit of 1992 was held in Brazil. Earth Summit of 1992 was held in Brazil. And in this particular Earth Summit of 1992, and formally this 1992 summit is called as United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED. United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED. Now, we'll see what are the outcomes of this UNCED. Now, as per this UNCED, these three documents were prepared. Number one was Rio Declaration. Now, this Rio Declaration consisted 27 principles of sustainable development. Now, guys, understand this particular thing. When we talk about the idea of sustainable development, it is based on a very simple principle that we need to keep in mind stakes of future generation on resources. Resources should be used in such a way that the future generation should also get their fair share. Our usage of resources should not threaten the future generations' stake. Okay, so there is one saying also, and you can use it whenever you are talking about sustainable development, and this saying goes like this, that environment or resources should never be used as it is a legacy from your forefathers. Rather, you should use the environment keeping in mind that it is a debt from your grandchildren. Now, whenever we take debt, debt is to be paid along with the interest. So, whatever you got, you have to give it back to your next generations also. Okay, so therefore, sustainable development's idea was born, and Rio Declaration consisted of 27 principles of sustainable development. Then there was the Agenda 21, that was an outcome. Now, 21 means agenda for 21st century. Agenda 21, it contained the action plans that are implemented, that are to be implemented on national level, state level, local level, so that how sustainable development can come. So action plan means implementable, executionable plan, that what is to be done. And then there are forest principles, fine, that largely emphasized on afforestation, as well as to eliminate, as well as to tame the problem of the deforestation. Now, however, they were not legally binding in nature. They were not legally binding in nature. Some legally binding arrangements also came out of this 1992 Earth Summit. And what are these legally binding arrangements? First was UNFCCC was born. Now, what is this UNFCCC? UNFCCC stands for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Again, I will repeat, and by the way, please download the notes. In notes, I have given all this. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this UNFCCC, countries which signed, they have to take certain binding commitments in order to reduce carbon emission, in order to solve the problem of climate change that is happening. I am going to discuss UNFCCC because this is the core topic that we are going to discuss. Then apart from that, there are other things that came. CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, what is Convention on Biological Diversity? Now, guys, understand this thing. Because of biological diversity, because of ecological services, ecological resources, we are getting a lot of advantage. Okay. For example, we are using so many, for example, there are jadi booties that we use for medicinal purposes. Okay, there are many different type of algae that have a lot of therapeutic usages. So biological diversity, it serves a very important ecological role. They are to be conserved, and biological diversity is to be conserved, and their resources should be shared amongst the humanity. So for conserving the biological diversity and sharing their benefit, this CBD was signed, and Biological Diversity Act, India also framed for implementing it in 2002. And then what happened? One negotiating committee was established in 1992. And what was the work of this negotiating committee? Work of this negotiating committee is to solve or to find the solution for combating the problem of desertification. So guys, we have seen that the deserts, they are expanding. Deserts are encroaching on the fertile areas, and in Africa, this has been a very big problem. Okay, so in order to combat the desertification, one negotiating committee was established, and in next 2-3 years, it recommended United Nation Conference to Combat Desertification. So UNCCD was UNCCD, United Nation Convention to Combat Desertification, came in 1995, and for that negotiating committee was created right now in 1992. So these were the major outcomes of Earth Summit. Fine. Rio Declaration, Agenda 21, Forest Principles, non-legally binding and legally binding. Now, we are going to discuss UNFCCC, United Nation Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay. Now, what happened? 1995, first Conference of Parties was held. Conference of Parties, COPs, COPs. Conference of Party is a meeting that will held once in a year. And in this particular meeting, all the member countries who have signed this UNFCCC, they come together and they discuss that what steps they have to take to ensure that climate change does not happen, to reduce the temperature rise that is going to happen, what climate goals are to be taken. All these things are discussed in Conference of Parties, which is the highest decision making body under UNFCCC, and first Conference of Party was held in 1995 in Berlin. Now, countries identified this particular thing, that if we want to solve the problem of climate change, some legally binding commitments have to be taken. Because if we don't take these legally binding targets, then nothing will happen. And therefore, what happened? 1997, Kyoto Protocol was finalized. Now, what is this Kyoto Protocol? Let's understand this particular thing, guys. So, Kyoto Protocol was first arrangement which gave certain legally binding targets to countries. Now, Kyoto Protocol provided that we are going to divide the world countries in following classification. What happened? The countries will be first classification was Annex 1 countries. Now, Annex 1 countries, it included the developed countries such as US, UK. Also, it included the economies in transition. Then there was Annex 2. So, Annex 1 had developed as well as transitional economies. Annex 2 only had the developed countries. And these Annex 2 countries had responsibility that they have to give financial assistance to developing countries so that developing countries can take steps to mitigate climate change, take steps to reverse the climate change that is happening. For that, financial assistance will be given. Then guys, there are this Annex B countries. Now, what are Annex B countries? So, Annex B countries are those countries within the developed countries to which some binding commitments have been given. Some binding commitments have been taken. So, when we talk about the Annex B countries, these are those countries on which the binding commitments have been imposed. These are those developed countries. Are you getting it or not? Now, then there are non-Annex 1 countries. So, these are the low income developing countries largely, which are not covered here, here or here. And then there are the least developed countries. So, non-Annex 1 country and LDC's least developed countries, on them there is no obligation, they don't have to contribute any finances or any such kind of a thing. Now, this entire Kyoto Protocol, now I am going to discuss in just 1 minute that what has to be done. First, we have just discussed the classification. Now, what is the logic behind this particular classification? Why this classification has been done? Now, understand one particular thing. This Kyoto Protocol and in fact UNFCCC is based on CBDR. It is based on the principle of CBDR, that is common but differentiated responsibility. Common but differentiated responsibility. In very simple terms, it means that ensuring that climate adaptation, climate mitigation, ensuring that climate change does not happen. Okay, this is a common responsibility, but this responsibility is differentiated. This responsibility is differentiated means it is everybody's responsibility to ensure that carbon emissions are reduced, but countries' contribution will be different. Historic polluters are the developed countries such as US, Europe. So, these US, Europe, they will have more responsibility. Developing countries, they have not been the historic emitters, so they will have less responsibility. So, responsibility is common, but the contributions will be differentiated. Therefore, the countries have been divided as Annex 1, Annex 2, Annex B, non-Annex countries and likewise. Now, we divided the countries in this classification. Now guys, understand this thing. I told you that Kyoto Protocol was agreed in 1997, but there was one condition, that Kyoto Protocol will come in implementation when two conditions are met. Condition number 1, 55 countries should ratify it, and those countries should ratify that which have 55% of world population. So, countries having 55% world population and 55 countries should ratify it. And after Russia and Canada ratified it, Kyoto Protocol came in force in 2005. Kyoto Protocol came in force in 2005. Now, a very basic question, that what is to be done under Kyoto Protocol? We have divided countries in certain groups, but what is to be done now? Now, see this particular thing. Basically, Annex B countries, I told you that they have some legally binding targets. So, Annex B countries, they have to take emission reduction targets. Listen this particular thing. Now, when we talk about Kyoto Protocol is divided in two phases. One is the phase 1 of Kyoto Protocol and other is the phase 2 of Kyoto Protocol. So, phase 1 of Kyoto Protocol, the timeline of phase 1 was 2008 to 2012 and timeline of phase 2 of Kyoto Protocol was 2013 to 2020. Okay. Now, in phase 1, NXB countries, they have to reduce their emissions. They have to reduce their emissions by 5% on 1990 level. So in 1990 level, on 1990 level, they have to reduce their emissions by 5%. Okay. And in phase 2, the countries, they have to reduce their emissions, NXB countries have to reduce their emission by 18%, and the baseline is again 1990. Okay, so again I'll explain. Emissions are to be reduced and this is legally binding on them. In phase 1, that is during 2008 to 2012 period, they have to reduce their emissions by 5% on 1990 level, and in second phase, that is 2013 to 2020, they have to reduce emission by 18%. Baseline is again 1990. And which emissions were targeted? So these six gases were targeted. What are these 6 gases that were targeted? Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride, hydrofluorocarbons, and perfluorocarbons. These 6 gases are to be reduced. How much is to be reduced? 5%, 18%. Okay, these targets were given. Now, in order to reach this, certain mechanisms were also provided. Okay, now what are these mechanisms? Clean development mechanism and joint implementation. I have given it in your notes, don't worry. Clean development mechanism and joint implementation. Now, one more thing guys, I would just like to tell you that Kyoto Protocol is now expired and it has now been replaced by Paris Agreement. So therefore, you need not to go too much in detail in Kyoto Protocol. You need to see this particular thing so that you understand that what major things are, what major issues are. But I will not advise you to go too much in nitty-gritties because simply it has now been expired. It has now been expired. Now, CDM, Clean Development Mechanism, and joint implementation. Now guys, see this particular thing. Suppose there is an NXB country. Suppose there is an NXB country. Let's say there is a developed country, any NXB developed country. Now, what they can do in clean development mechanism or joint implementation, these are the two different mechanisms, but the underlying philosophy, underlying methodology is same. Suppose there is any NXB country. They can undertake a project in any non-NX country. Let's say India. They can take a project in any non-NX country, let's say India. If that particular project reduces emissions, then that thing will be counted towards the commitments of that NXB country. Let's take an example. Suppose there is Australia. And let's say here we have India, non-NX country. Fine, non-NX country. Let's say India is using coal. India is using coal for making electricity. Now, when we use coal, we know this particular thing that the carbon dioxide and many such gases, they are released while we are burning coal. Now, if let's say Australia gives India certain technology by which India can ditch this coal and can make renewable energy. Suppose they have given them solar photovoltaic cell, and by that now we don't need to use coal. And as we are not using coal, obviously emissions will come down. Obviously the emissions will come down. Now these emissions have reduced because of Australia that has given us technology, because of Australia that has given us aid. So if this kind of an arrangement has been done in some other country, then this NXB country can count that particular thing towards their arrangement. Okay. And then there is a carbon credit program. There is carbon credit program. Now what is this carbon credit? These are the tradable certificates. Suppose some corporation or some country, they have done some afforestation. Okay. If they have done afforestation, they have planted some trees, they will get a carbon credit for that. And they can trade that particular carbon credit with some other country. Let's take the help of this. Let's take this particular thing and let's understand it. Suppose there is a country A. This country A is an NXB country. It is an NXB country. So legal binding is there. Suppose this A country can emit 100 unit of carbon. Let's say they can emit 100 unit of carbon. And let's say there is some another country also. Let's say there is some another country. I will take different names. X country, Y country, X country, Y country. X country has been given quota of 100 units carbon they can emit. Okay. Let's say Y country, they have quota of 100 units of carbon, same quota, they can also emit these 100 unit of carbon. Okay. Now let's say country X actually emitted 110 unit of carbon. 110 unit of carbon they have emitted. So they have emitted excess. What they can do? They can take a carbon quota, they can take a carbon certificate from some other country. Now suppose Y, it was also given the quota of emitting 100 unit of carbon. What they did, actually they have done a lot of afforestation. They have planted a lot of trees. And by that afforestation, what they have done, they have earned the carbon credit. And let's say they have earned 10 carbon credits. What they can do, they can give this 10 carbon credits to this X country and will take money in return. Will take money in return. These are the tradable certificates. Now what they will do, they will provide an incentive to the countries that if they will do more afforestation, if they will do less carbon emission, they will get a carbon credit. And that carbon credit they can trade, that carbon credit they can sell. So it has created an incentive for reducing the carbon emissions for afforestation. So this carbon credit program was taken up, CDM program was taken up, joint implementation program was taken up. Under CDM and joint implementation, again I tell you that a NXB country, a developed country, can take a project in some other developing country which will reduce or which will minimize the carbon emissions, and whatever carbon minimization will happen, advantage of that will be counted for this developed country, NXB country. And in carbon credit, if you have reduced the carbon emissions, if you have done some afforestation, you will get a carbon credit which you can trade. So all these tools were there under the Kyoto Protocol. You need to know these particular things because questions on such kind of lines could be asked. Then guys, moving on. So I told you that the Kyoto Protocol was implemented in two phases, that is 2008 to 12 and 2013 to 20. So 2020 Kyoto Protocol has already been expired 3 years back. Now guys, when we talk about the Kyoto Protocol has largely been called as a failure. It has largely been called as a failure. Now first of all, a question comes that why Kyoto Protocol has been called as a failure. So there are certain reasons in this particular capacity. Let's understand the reason. Number one, USA never ratified Kyoto Protocol. And we know that USA has been a big historic emitter. USA was absent from the Kyoto Protocol. We find this particular thing that Canada withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol in 2012. Canada withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol from 2012. Okay. Second thing, guys, we find this particular thing that Japan, Russia, New Zealand, they did not agreed to phase 2 of Kyoto Protocol, that is 2013 to 2020. So you see this thing, USA never ratified Kyoto Protocol, Canada withdrew in 2012, Japan, Russia, New Zealand, they said that will not be following the second phase of the Kyoto Protocol. Are you getting it or not? Also, under these 6 gases that we have discussed, ozone depleting substances were not covered, which was a very big problem during that particular time. So therefore, it was said that the Kyoto Protocol has been a failure, it did not deliver. Moreover, developed and developing countries' rivalry also became stark, because developed countries, they said that developing countries such as India, China, they should be taking some binding agreements, binding commitments. But China always said that under CBDR, we need not to take any binding commitments. So dispute, rivalries and withdrawal of the major economies resulted in the failure of the Kyoto Protocol. Okay. Then guys, what happened? Actually, to succeed Kyoto Protocol post 2020, some other arrangement was needed. That what will be done after 2020, what will be the roadmap after 2020. And that roadmap, the roadmap after 2020, it was actually adopted in COP21, Conference of Parties 21. Now, Conference of Parties 21 was held in 2015 in Paris. And in this Conference of Parties 21, Paris Agreement was signed. Paris Agreement was signed. Now, guys, understand this particular thing, that today, whatever climate negotiations are happening under UNFCCC, all those climate negotiations are happening as per the Paris Agreement that was finalized in 2015. So, today, all the countries who have been the signatories of UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, all these countries negotiations held on the basis of the Paris Agreement of 2015. Now, let's discuss that what this Paris Agreement of 2015 has largely taken up. What are the key highlights or the key takeaways of the Paris Agreement? Number one, it adopted temperature goals. It adopted temperature goals. Now, Paris Agreement provided this thing that we will ensure that temperature rise should not go beyond 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial level. And one ambitious temperature goal was also taken, that is 1.5 degree. So you say now that okay, I'll try that I get 80% and if possible I'll score 90% also. So something like that. That will try that compared to pre-industrial level, temperature rise should not go beyond 2 degrees Celsius, and if possible will strive to restrict the temperature rise to maximum 1.5 degrees Celsius. So this temperature goal was taken up, and fine, this was something that was taken up, temperature goal. Then second feature of this particular Paris Agreement was that countries have to take INDCs, that is intended nationally determined contributions. So if you have to reach this, some steps have to be taken. Na? So it was said that all the countries, you yourself decide that what you will do, what you will not do. Because Kyoto Agreement, we have learned one very important lesson. It is that if you give some agreements, country will not follow. As Canada withdrew, USA did not ratified. Okay, so they said that first of all, INDCs, they will be voluntary targets that will be taken by every country, and these targets have to be taken by both developed and developing country, and this is a feature, this is a distinguishing feature of Kyoto and Paris. In Kyoto, goals were to be taken by only developed. In Paris, developing, developed, both have to take targets, but these targets are voluntary, and these voluntary targets are called as INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions. Now, India also took these 3 INDCs. What are these 3 INDCs? Number one, to reduce emission intensity by 33% by 2030. Now, baseline is 2005. Keep in your mind that whatever emissions we were doing in 2005, compared to that, we will do reduction by at least 33% by 2030. By the way, one more thing I am telling you guys, we have revised these INDCs goals. Revised goal I will take up in just a minute, but first we'll see that what were the original targets that India took. So reduce the emission intensity by 33% by 2030. The baseline is 2005. Second, to generate 40% of electricity, from non-fossil fuels by 2030. 40% of electricity by non-fossil fuels. And third, to create an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion ton. We need to do carbon capture, we need to plant trees so that 2.5 to 3 billion ton of carbon can be captured. Okay, so these are the 3 INDCs that were taken up. Okay, they got revised, I'll discuss in just in a minute. Then third important feature of Paris Agreement was climate finance. Climate finance. Now guys, understand this particular thing, that what is this climate finance? So since UNFCCC got started, developing countries are saying this particular thing, that they want climate finance. See, they say that developed countries are historic emitters. Because of their actions in the past, today we are seeing the climate change as a problem. They have burnt coal when was their time, and today you are forcing us that give up the coal, don't use the carbon technologies. So give us money so that we can transition from carbon based technologies. Give us money so that we can adopt or deploy more renewable energies. Give us money. So actually guys, what is happening since 2009, Copenhagen. So in 2009, Fine. COP15 was held in Copenhagen, Denmark. COP15 was held in Copenhagen, Denmark, 2009. And in this, it was agreed that $100 billion, it was agreed that $100 billion every year will be provided by developed countries to developing countries. And it was agreed that this climate finance will now come post to till 2020. This climate finance should start coming. The next was global stock take, GST. Now see this thing, guys. As we, let's say I decided that I will prepare for the UPSC CSC examination, okay, and then I will take targets, I will make study plan that I will do this. Suppose 1 month has already happened since I prepared for exam. After 1 month, I need to assess that whether I am reaching my targets or not, whether whatever I planned I am doing that or not. So that assessment is to be done. And in Paris, it was provided that it was provided that at periodic intervals, this global stock take exercise is to be done. And guys, the first global stock take has been done in 2023 in COP28 that has been held now in Dubai. So this is the first time that this GST global stock take that was agreed in Paris, it has been taken up now. Okay. So first has been taken in 2023 and now at every 5 years it will be held. So next will be in 2028. Okay. And then adaptation and loss and damage will be agreed. Now understand this thing. What is adaptation? See guys, climate change has to come, climate change will come. Climate change is going to be a reality. So how you will live in a world where climate change has happened, how you will live in this particular world. So you need to adapt with that particular world. So for that, adaptation fund, adaptation assistance is to be given. Adaptation assistance is to be given. And along with the adaptation assistance, loss and damage fund is also to be created. Now let's understand that what is this loss and damage fund. Some countries will face permanent damage. Let's say there are some coastal countries. Okay, they are dependent on a lot of tourism. Certain areas will be submerged permanently under the water because of the sea level rise that will happen. So there's a permanent damage, permanent loss that they have faced. So to compensate these countries which are facing permanent loss and damage because of climate change, they have to be given money. So this adaptation and loss and damage fund is to be agreed. And all these things are now being taken up by the successive conference of parties that are held every year. So this year Dubai 28 COP has been held. Last year it was held in Egypt. Before that it was held in Glasgow 2021. So we are actually revolving around these issues. Now, so as all these things are going on and we have taken up so ambitious targets, for example, will ensure that temperature rise should not go beyond 2 degrees Celsius and if possible temperature rise should not go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are taking so much ambitious targets. But let's see what is the ground reality. So guys, ground reality is this. Recently IPCC. Now what is IPCC? IPCC stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, IPCC, it has released just 1 year back its sixth assessment report. And in this sixth assessment report, IPCC has given certain findings and I am going to share that with you. Number 1, CO2 concentration is highest in the last 2 million years. Sea level rise has attained fastest rates in the last 3000 years. In last 3000 years, fastest sea level rise we are now seeing. Then Arctic sea ice is lowest in last 1000 years. And glaciers retreat is unprecedented in last 2000 years. The highest rate glacier is receding. And this IPCC sixth assessment report already provided that in 2030s will already breach 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. And by 2100, 2.5 to 4 degrees Celsius temperature rise will happen if we will do the business as usual approach. And one more report I want to share with you. And guys, this report we have covered I think 2-3 days back in newspaper analysis also. 2 times I have covered this news in this report in last 15 days. This is the latest report. WMO, World Meteorological Organization, has released 2011-2020 Okay, global climate change report. And it has provided that in these last 10 years, on an average 1 meter glaciers have receded every year. 1 meter not in 10 years, 1 meter every year glaciers have receded. Okay, this has been released by WMO, World Meteorological Organization report. Okay, now guys, as all these things are happening, countries, they were asked in 2021 that the countries now need to do more. And guys, if we talk, this is now if we see here, India has played a very important role and a good role. That actually guys, last year India has revised its INDCs also. Let's first of all see what India has revised and then we'll go to COP28. So if you remember, I have told you that in 2015 India has taken certain goals. For example, what was the original NDC? 30 to 35% of emission reduction will be done at 2005 level. 30 to 35% emission reduction will be done. And then the second goal was 40% of our electricity will come from non-fossil fuels and 2.5 to 3 billion ton of carbon sink is to be developed. These are the goals that India took in 2015. We have revised it. What revision we have done? So we will now be doing the emission reduction at the rate of 45% emission reduction will be done. Okay. Second, we will be bringing 50% of our electricity from non-fossil fuels. Earlier it was 40%, now 50%. Earlier emissions were to be reduced in the range of 33 to 35% and now emissions will be reduced to 45%. And then carbon sink will be same as earlier. Now one thing I want to tell you, as a matter of concept, it should be clear to you. There was one concept also that was there, Panch Amrit goals. So Panch Amrit, they were the 5 goals such as this, that is carbon neutrality by 2070, 1 billion ton of additional carbon sink. That also India took in 2021, but that is not the revision of INDC. Keep in your mind. Some aspirants think that is the revision of INDC. No, that is something that we just said that okay, we'll do. But official INDCs today are this. Today they are this. Fine. So India is already doing good. Now COP28 that has been held this particular year, Dubai. Now let's discuss key takeaways from there. And again, all these takeaways I have provided in the notes and the notes are in the Telegram channel. Now, first of all guys, before this COP28 started, controversy emerged. Okay, why? Because president of COP28 was the head of the largest fossil fuel company, okay, of UAE and in fact the world. Okay, so it was said that the president of the fossil fuel company is hosting the COP28. Deliberately I am not using the name because in UPSC we don't need to use such personal remarks or names are not to be used. So it was said that what will happen? A kind of a non-seriousness will come. But anyhow, moving on. Now, in COP28, first is the energy efficiency pledge that was floated. Energy efficiency pledge. Now, first of all, what is this energy efficiency pledge and then what is the India's response? Now, all things I will discuss that were agreed and what is India's response that also I'll discuss. So, energy efficiency pledge was based on 2 pillars. Pillar number 1, that renewable energies are to be tripled up by 2030. And it was provided that we need to deploy 11,000 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. 11,000 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. This was one. And second was energy efficiency is to be doubled compared to 2022 level. Okay. For example guys, you are using ACs. Today you are using 1-star AC, 2-star AC, that is using a lot of electricity. Today there are the 5-star ACs. If you replace your 1-star AC with the 5-star AC, it will do the same cooling but in less electricity. So we need to adopt energy efficient appliances. So energy efficiency is to be doubled up and renewable energy is to be tripled up by 2030. Okay. Now what is India's response? India has not signed this energy efficiency pledge. Why India has not signed it? Because India says that we are not going to take the binding agreements because of the CBDR principle, common but differentiated responsibility. And guys, if I tell you, India is already India, if you see, already has taken up the target to deploy to bring 50% of electricity from renewables. And if I tell you, today we have already said that right now around 175 gigawatt of electricity of India is coming from renewables. We have already said that we will take this 175 to 500 gigawatt by 2030. So already we are tripling up our renewable energy, but India said that will not take any commitment. Will do, but will not take any commitment. Okay. The next thing is that global stock take. If you remember, I discussed about global stock take when I was telling you about the Paris Agreement. So in global stock take, it was provided that you need to do review, okay, that what has happened in the past. So target in Paris was to ensure that temperature rise should not go beyond 2 degrees Celsius. But are we going to reach it? No. So it was provided in the global stock take that if we want to reach our Paris Agreement goals, we need to reduce the carbon emissions by 43% by 2030. Now, one more thing, baseline here is 2019. Baseline here is 2019. So whatever emission were happening in 2019, compared to that, 43% reduction is to be done by 2030, 60% reduction is to be achieved by 2035, and 100% net zero is to be achieved by 2050. If we do, only then we will be able to reach that 1.5 degree goal. So now I told you that global stock take is a kind of an assessment. For example, you decided that I'll prepare for civil services. Now you are doing study. After 1 month, you will review that what I have done. And after that, you will further revise that, okay, whether I need to slow up, whether I need to fasten up or whatever. So they said that whatever we have done, it is not sufficient. And in order to reach 1.5 degree goal, we need to do the reduction by these numbers. Now guys, India again had not taken any binding agreement that yes, we will do the emission reduction. No, India has not taken any agreement. Now one thing, already guys, India has said that we will achieve our net zero by 2070. But again, that is not a legally binding agreement that India has taken as per their Panchamrit goals. But again, it is also not a legally binding agreement. The next is fossil fuel phase out versus phase down. Fossil fuel phase out versus phase down. Now, let's say understand this controversy. So basically in 2021, that is the COP that was held in Glasgow in 2021. Okay, in 2021 COP that was held in Glasgow. This controversy of phase out and phase down emerged at that year also. Now phase out means that a particular fossil fuel, and in Glasgow it was coal. In Glasgow it was coal. So phase out meant that completely coal will be eliminated. Phase down meant that coal will not be completely eliminated. Its quantity will be reduced that a country is using. So guys, developed countries in 2021 in Glasgow, they insisted that phase out should be adopted. But developing countries such as India, they said that no, phase out should not be adopted, phase down should be adopted. We will reduce the amount of coal that we are using, because today guys, this is a reality that more than 50% and in fact around 70% of India's electricity is coming from coal. Okay, now see, when we talk about renewable energies, I just want to share you one data. See here, 41% of installed capacity is through renewables. Now, installed and generation capacity is different. Okay, so today 30% of electricity maximum is coming from renewable plus nuclear, and around 70% electricity today is coming from coal. So we are still dependent too much on coal today. We are dependent too much on coal, and we said that we cannot eliminate coal. We will go for phase down for the coal. Okay, and that finally got agreed in 2021 in COP, 2021 in Glasgow. Now in 2023 in Dubai, again the developed countries, they picked this thing, and now they said that not only coal is the center of concern, they took the phase out of all fossil fuels. Now in that oil will be there, gas will be there, coal will be there. So developed countries pressurize that all fossil fuels, not only coal, all fossil fuels need to be phased out, and we need to agree on a timeline. Now developing countries and the oil companies, they resisted it. They said that why you are talking about phase out, let's talk about phase down. Okay, so guys, what happened? India and developing countries said that phase out will not be adopted, phase down will be adopted. And finally, phase down got adopted, but in that phase down, it was said that rigorously coal is to be reduced. Rigorously coal is to be reduced. Okay, fine. These things I have provided in notes, don't worry. Then loss and damage fund. Loss and damage fund. Now, loss and damage fund was agreed in COP27. In COP27 that was held last year in Egypt. So loss and damage fund was agreed. Now what is this loss and damage fund? So guys, loss and damage fund is a dedicated fund from which money will be given to those countries which are going to face a permanent damage to their economy because of climate change. Very simple, just a one-liner concept. So this fund was agreed in 2022 Egypt last year, and this year 2023 Dubai, it has been formally launched. And on the first day it got launched. It has formally been launched, and till the end, $800 million have actually come in this particular loss and damage fund also, which is being called as the biggest achievement of COP28. Okay. But there are certain big challenges in this. There are certain big challenges in this loss and damage fund. Number one challenge. As we talk about this loss and damage fund, right now this loss and damage fund is being hosted at World Bank. This loss and damage fund is being hosted at World Bank. Interim host of this loss and damage fund, who is going to hold this money? World Bank. And World Bank is going to charge hefty commission, hefty fees, which will reduce the money available for developing countries. Second, the contribution in this loss and damage fund are not binding. Contribution in this particular loss and damage fund are not binding. Means, suppose once a country has given the money, let me tell you, $10 million were given by Japan, $100 million were given by Germany, $100 million are given by UAE, likewise countries have given the money. Now, once Germany and UAE have given $100 million, will next year also be there any commitment that they have to give? No. So point is that you have collected, let's say, $800 million, but today trillions of dollars of loss and damages are going to be there. First, how you will compensate those trillions of dollars of loss and damages out of this $800 million? One. Secondly, once this $800 million has been finished, how replenishment of that particular fund will be done? No discussion, no agreement, no consensus is there on this particular thing. And USA resisted that, will not take any binding agreement. Okay. Fine. The next problem that is there in this loss and damage fund is that what are the principles on whose basis you will determine who will get how much? Every country will say that we are facing this. Now see, money is less. Loss and damages will be worth trillions of dollars, and money available till now is around $800 million. How you will compensate every country? There will be the disputes within the developing and LDC and island nations that who will get how much. So all these particular issues did not got discussed. So even L&D got launched, but there are again a lot of problems in this fund, this particular issue. Then next, developing countries had said that we need to define climate finance very clearly. Now understand this particular thing, guys, that actually what has happened. See, developed country. Now, if you remember, I told you that $100 billion, I told you that it was agreed in 2009 Copenhagen, that $100 billion by 2020, okay, will be given by developed countries to developing country. And keep in mind that this $100 billion is every year. So they said that by 2020, we will reach this $100 billion limit and will give every year $100 billion to developing country. So $100 billion were agreed in 2009 Copenhagen, and it was to come by 2020. Now what actually has happened? Any grant that a developed country are giving, let's say even if they are giving the grant for health, even if they are giving the grant for education, even if they are giving the grant for road construction, they are classifying that grant as a climate finance. They are classifying that grant as a climate finance. And guys, if I just tell you some report and some data here. So basically, guys, see this particular thing, that according to an OECD report, according to Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD report, in 2020, $83 billion were given by developed countries to developing country. But according to Oxfam report, this report says that no, only $22 billion were given in 2020. Oxfam report says that often even other assistance and grants that developed country are giving, they're classifying it as a green climate, climate finance. Actual money is very less. So we need to define very clearly that what will come in climate finance, what will not come in climate finance. But again, here also nothing has happened. The next is Green Credit Initiative, and this is an initiative that has been proposed by India. Green Credit Initiative, it has been proposed by India. Okay, again I am saying and again many times I am saying, so that you can focus on the video only. Notes are there in Telegram channel. Please download the notes. Link for Telegram is given in description box in YouTube. Now, Green Credit Initiative. Now, basically guys, what is this Green Credit Initiative? So, this is going to be a carbon credit program kind of an arrangement. So, see, there are wastelands, there are degraded lands. What can be done? Private groups, individuals, NGOs, civil societies, they can take up the wasteland. On that particular wasteland, they can plant the trees, they can do afforestation. And when they will do afforestation, they will get a carbon credit. And this carbon credit they can trade with some other industry who has to limit their carbon emission. So let's say steel industry, they have to reduce their carbon emission. And one way of reducing their carbon emission is to become less polluting or to buy carbon credit. So they can buy the carbon credit for these private groups or individuals. So it is going to contribute into the ecological economy. So what is this Green Credit Initiative in very simple terms? Wasteland, degraded lands, deforested lands, they can be taken up by private individuals, can be taken up by the NGO, self-help groups. They can plant trees on that and will get credit, and then that credit they can trade with some corporation or some industry. Fine. So this is something that India has launched. And then Altera. Now what is this Altera? Altera is a private fund. Keep in mind, now these things are often asked in prelims examination. It is a private fund which has been launched by UAE, and this fund will mobilize $250 billion by 2030. And UAE had said that they will contribute $30 billion, and in total $250 billion will be mobilized in 2030, and this money will be invested in renewable technologies, in climate infrastructure projects, green projects. This money will be invested, and dedicatedly from this fund, money will be invested in India to deploy 6 gigawatt of renewable energies by 2030. So India will also get the benefit under this Altera. This Altera fund will help India or will give financing to India so that 6 gigawatt worth of electricity, renewable electricity, India can deploy. Okay. And then the next takeaway is global goal on adaptation. Global goal on adaptation. Now, what is this global goal on adaptation? Understand this thing. Guys, I told you that mitigation, see, there are two words. One is mitigation and one is adaptation. Mitigation is to reduce the severity or the negative impact of anything. That is mitigation. And adaptation is to learn to live with a new change that has come. So as climate change will come, we need to learn as how we will live with that changed world. So that is adaptation. So for adaptation, regional plans, local plans, national plans needs to be there. So there needs to be global goal on adaptation. Under this global goal on adaptation, what will be done? Member countries, okay, will draw adaptation plan and will agree on them. Adaptation plans will be drawn. Now, this is something that has been agreed. And finally, India has said this thing that India is going to host COP33 in 2028. COP33 in 2028 will be hosted by India. Now a prelims question comes that has ever India hosted a COP? Yes. India has hosted COP already in 2002. Now India wants to host the COP in 2028. But for that, the countries who are already the signatories of UNFCCC, they have to approve this proposal. So guys, these are all the things that have come, and I have compiled it through all the major newspapers that have been there, be it Indian Express, be it Hindu, be it Hindustan Times, okay, Mint newspapers. So whatever has been there has been compiled in this particular video. So that is all guys about it, and with this we come to an end to this session. And guys, if you have liked the video, if you think that this content has helped you in any capacity, please like the video, please leave a comment. It takes a lot of hard work to make such videos and to do such research along with the notes. So please leave a like and leave your lovely comments if you have liked it. Thank you so much. Now we'll meet in the next video, and please follow our newspaper daily newspaper analysis video also that we take every day. Thank you so much.